I tend to find inspiration in a lot of places. Obviously, first and foremost being my faith. But when I start to think about powerful messages throughout history, I'm often reminded that the most memorable messages aren't random, and they're very intentional and very clear. And they are essentially this pieced together version of something that is capturing both this problem and a solution, right? Essentially, that's what it breaks down to. And I believe that the same principle applies, of course, to our business. And the thing that I see a lot happening, you can look on social media, you could look on websites, or even when you're speaking to a business owner face to face and you ask them what it is that they do, the thing about messaging is that it isn't about what sounds good. It's a set, or like what's trending, right? Like that's usually a bigger topic. It's about what specific words capture your unique purpose. They have to do that in such a way that it provides so much clarity for the person that you're trying to target, right? So your ideal audience, what I like to call your brand believers, but it has to be so magnetic that people can instantly recognize it as an answer to a problem that they've been seeking, right? Like you have to instantly catch their attention. We live in this world that is so full of like pick me, and it's full of advertisements and, people are always being sold to, but when you can initially provide a solution to a problem that they're facing, it instantly grabs their attention. And I think so often in just speaking to business owners in general, whether they are faith-based or not, we lack that. We're not clear on our messaging, and it seriously harms so much of our business, and it leaves so much money on the table because if you confuse someone, you lose someone, right? And it has to be so simple, but yet so powerful. And so how do we marry the two? I remember there was this season in my business where I felt like I was using this language that sounded really professional, and it sounded what I thought was very in line with what my audience needed to hear. I was creating content that I fully believed was marketable, and I felt completely disconnected from my audience. And most importantly, I felt really disconnected from my own messaging. And I felt like if I don't fully understand what it is, and I'm just speaking from my head and not my heart, my results were truly reflecting that. And I knew that my audience was missing the point in some aspect of it. So I sat down one evening and I felt like I have to get a handle on things. And I reflected on it. I sat in prayer and I felt this gentle but subtle nudge to start creating this messaging and crafting it, and start uncovering what I was really trying to say and figuring out, how do I do all of this? How do I make it to where it's so powerful, so transformative, but very clear to my audience how I can help them, not how they can help me? And this revelation really hit me in that my unique purpose wasn't something that I needed to create, right? God had already instilled that in me. I already had everything that I needed, but it was waiting to be articulated. And I get it. It is one of the hardest aspects of being a business owner when you have this beautiful thing that you're creating and you're so close to it. It's near and dear to you, and you have all these thoughts and ideas, and it's so amazing in your mind, but how do you get the words out? And I think that that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to share that with you today, because I started my business, and what I've seen other business owners do is I started from a place where I knew that I had the solution to a problem that people were facing, and people were missing it because they weren't clear on what it is that I had to offer. And I feel like sharing these insights with you are so important because it not just transformed my messaging, but also the messaging of so many other entrepreneurs within this Eden and Empire community, but just people I've worked with in general, or just friends, things that I've seen with other business owners. It's not about having or hiring amazing, clever copywriter, right? Or chat GTP or whatever the case is, or having these incredible formulas. While those things are great, and I'm not discouraging you from using them, the thing about it is that when we can gain such clarity on what our authentic purpose is, and I talk about this so much because it is such a foundational piece that so many people overlook because they already think they have it all figured out. And I think if they went deeper, they could unlock so much more in alignment with their purpose. It would drive so many different aspects of their business. They wouldn't feel so stuck. And I've done it. I've spoken to so many people and they have bits and pieces, but they don't have the full picture. And when you're really clear on your authentic purpose, what ends up happening is that your messaging ends up becoming just this natural extension of who you are already meant to be. And you're essentially just stepping into that in a fuller way, like you're stepping into it more fully. And I think the thing that maybe I want to start with is this perspective shift that changes everything. So most messaging advice approaches communication backwards. And I know you hear me reference this a lot when it comes to marketing, but I really think that a lot of it approaches it with not obviously a kingdom mindset, not that it's necessarily wrong, but if we are purpose driven, we are impact driven, we are really wanting to make a difference in people's lives, it's not about the sale. It tells you to study what's working for others, right? And the first problem with that is that you were not designed to be like everyone else. You came with your own unique, different set of a million different things. So already you're approaching it a little bit backwards because you're trying to copy what worked for someone else. And taking the frameworks of other people is great to some extent, but it will only get you so far. And then they try to mimic what successful formulas people have used to grow their businesses. And I'm guilty of it. I started my business in that way, and there's nothing wrong with it. It just limits what you were given. And what essentially ends up happening is that they begin to position themselves according to what worked for other people rather than what was designed for them. And the thing that I want to really hone in on is, what if we were to change this perspective completely? And instead of starting with these external trends that we see, I mean, I feel like we live in a world that is so full of what's trending, right? And it's important to some degree, but essentially, what if you started with not what's trending, but this internal truth that we all possess, and your messaging ends up being something that is not, it's not just something that you craft, but something that you uncover when you go deep within and gain this connection with your authentic purpose. And I think that all of these, if I go back and I think about all of these great leaders throughout history, they didn't decide, I'm just going to have somebody write this for me. And I mean, some people do have copywriters, but they essentially didn't go in and recite these carefully crafted speeches that sounded just like everyone else. Like when you think about the people who are really great and left the most impactful, memorable speeches throughout history, they didn't sound like anybody else. They didn't sound like the 10 other, motivational speakers or great leaders. They sounded exactly like themselves. And we knew from the instant, like nowadays, we know from the instant that we hear certain quotes that, oh, that came specifically from them. And it's hard for other people to replicate because we know immediately that it's from somebody else. And they spoke with such conviction about, what they knew to be true. And their messages weren't necessarily calculated. They were aligned with what was, their own experiences, their core values, things that they believe. And so my faith reminds me that authenticity carries this power. And I know it's a buzzword we hear so often, but it carries this power that formulas never will. And in the same way that I have my own unique experiences and perspectives, it gives me my own specific language that I can use certain metaphors and certain stories and insights that perfectly communicate what my purpose is. And I wouldn't find those things if I didn't go deeper into who I was and why I'm the right one for my audience. And, the thing about messaging is it isn't this big complex thing that I think people try to make it seem like it is. Really, it's diving in deeper and finding more clarity rather than finding the right formula. You were designed to facilitate a very specific change in people's lives, and you have to really clearly identify and address why it matters to the people that you serve. And I've noticed something fascinating when I'm working with clients is that what ends up happening is when we start with purpose clarity rather than what the world tells us that we need to be, or like we only focus on what we're trying to sell, we end up crafting, or we end up being able to create our messages in a way that ends up being so effortless because it's coming from a place that's true and authentic to ourselves. And it's essentially like we're uncovering this very special language that has been really designed within you all along. And so as you're kind of thinking about these things, because I encourage you every podcast to take something away from it, and I want you to reflect on these few questions. So what very specific transformation am I uniquely equipped to facilitate? What recurring themes do I see often showing up when I'm telling my story, or my clients end up, telling me their stories, or I'm reciting things about my clients? What metaphors do I have, or unique analogies that end up naturally coming to mind when I'm explaining my work? And I think those are kind of important to pay attention to. And then lastly, what core principles most deeply inform my approach? For me, I ended up discovering that my purpose really centered around helping purpose-driven entrepreneurs build businesses that honor both their faith and their values. And we did it in a way that also, helped them build these profitable brands and figured out how to market all of that. And it ended up revealing that what I was essentially trying to do is to help them not sacrifice what is sacred to them, but to build something of significance. So sorry, I said that kind of weird. So essentially what we were doing is that we are building businesses that don't sacrifice what's important to us as we're building something of significance. And it now becomes the foundation of all of my messaging. And my faith influences how I approach this balance, even though I don't believe in the word balance. That's just the best way for me to explain it. But this principle really applies universally. And once you understand your purpose, you can more easily identify this very specific language that captures both what you do and why it matters to people. And I think that this is where your message ends up finding its power. And I think that most business owners end up making this mistake that focuses on very surface level benefits. I want to get more clients. I want to increase my revenue, and those are all great. But what is the more powerful messaging that ends up driving really why you do it? When you address both this practical outcome and the deeper significance behind it, that's when real power comes to your messaging. And if you consider even the very specific words your ideal clients use when they're describing their challenges, that can be powerful. It could be them talking about the things that they aspire to do, or you end up listening for these recurring phrases when your clients are, communicating with you. You have to really pay attention to all of these very subtle things, but they're so powerful. You could go on your social media on posts, or you could go back to emails and create this very strong response because it's rooted in what your clients are really struggling with. So pay attention to not only those things, but the language that really feels most aligned with you and your purpose. And when I did this reflection myself, I ended up realizing this very significant thing that ended up happening is that my clients weren't just using this practical business language. They were creating something that was very specific, that had integrity, it had purpose, it had meaningful impact. And my clients, I knew inside, wanted to be able to communicate and share this language with, or their offers, in a way that felt real to them. It didn't sound scripted. It didn't sound, robotic, or that somebody else had crafted it. They knew that it was tailored specifically to them. And the thing that I find that most marketing advice fails or falls very flat with is that it focuses too much on these techniques that are more psychological triggers, which is, it's rooted in science, but really what we should be focusing is more on these authentic truths that our clients are facing. And the truth is that most powerful messaging emerges when you come from a place not of multiplication, but aligning really with your core purpose. And there's nothing wrong with multiplication, but when you're wanting to make a deeper impact, you have to be more focused on the impact and aligning with what you were called to do. And then the multiplication just naturally happens. So if you want to create messaging that really resonates on a deeper level, go back to that. Go back to those moments where you spoke with a client, you saw a post and you saw the deeper issue behind what they were facing. So I want you to take away something really powerful today, in that your messaging isn't just what you say. It's really this overflow of who you were meant to be. And when you end up communicating your purpose and it aligns with what God has, really called you to do, both your impact and your fulfillment end up growing. So next time we meet, I want to really explore how to find how your specific audience that you are very uniquely positioned to serve, and figure out how can we go a little bit deeper in that. But for now, what I would love to do is hear from you. I want to know the insights that you have from today's episode and how it really resonated with you. So please drop me a DM, share something in the comments of this video, and I want to continue this conversation. We might have future podcast episodes about this. We talk about this in the masterclass that I have coming up. It's free, and I'll drop info in the show notes. But until then, I want you to remember that you were designed with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose, and your authentic message is out there waiting to be uncovered.